Hi everyone, welcome back to Forsaken Joe. I have something that's been burning a hole in my chest, and I don't know how else to get it out. So here it is, the kind of story you never think you'll live through until you're standing in the wreckage of it all, wondering what just happened. It started with a phone call at 6:23 a.m. My wife's name lit up the screen, but it wasn't her voice on the line. It was some stranger, a man, mumbling, I think you should come pick her up." My heart nearly exploded. I'm still half asleep, confused, thinking she's at her friend's or maybe her car broke down. But then he says, "She's here, at Trent's place. She's, not doing too well." Trent, her coworker. I don't even remember the drive over there. My hands were shaking so bad, I almost hit a curb. When I pulled up outside his building, I saw her shoes on the sidewalk. Not neatly placed, just thrown there, like they didn't matter. I walked in and found her on the couch, pale, mascara smeared down her cheeks, a half-empty glass on the table. She looked up at me, and for a second, it was like she didn't even recognize me. "Clyde," she whispered, like my name was a question. I wanted to shout, "What the hell is going on here?" But my voice cracked. I just stood there like a fool, frozen, while Trent stood in the kitchen pretending not to exist. The air was thick with something unspoken, something I didn't want to understand. When we got home, she didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just crawled into bed and stared at the wall like she was haunted by something only she could see. And I'm sitting here, writing this, feeling like my whole life is a story I didn't realize I wasn't the main character of. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face from that morning. Those hollow eyes, like she was staring into some dark void I couldn't reach. I thought maybe I was overthinking. Maybe she just had too much to drink, but then my phone buzzed around 1 a.m. It was a message from an unknown number. I almost didn't open it. I wish I hadn't. The message was just one sentence. "You should ask your wife what really happened after midnight." My stomach dropped so hard I felt physically sick. I read it over and over again, my heart pounding so loud it felt like it might break my ribs. Who would send that? Why would they? Was this some sick prank? Or was someone trying to warn me? I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind spiraling in 1,000 directions. I couldn't confront her right away. She was asleep, curled up on the edge of the bed, breathing unevenly like someone who'd cried themselves into exhaustion. I didn't want to wake her, but at the same time, I couldn't sit there knowing nothing. I went downstairs, poured myself a glass of whiskey even though I never drink, and started scrolling through her social media, her photos, even old texts. That's when I noticed something I'd never seen before. A string of late-night messages with Trent. Not a single word was outright damning, but the tone, it was different. Too casual, too familiar, like they were sharing some inside joke I wasn't part of. I felt my chest tighten. I could hear my own breathing, heavy and shaky, like I was about to lose control. I kept reading, looking for answers, but all I found were fragments. An emoji here, a vague comment there. Nothing conclusive, but enough to keep me awake, obsessing over every letter. When she woke up the next morning, she saw me sitting there at the table, my phone in my hand, and for the first time, she looked scared. Not just nervous, scared. I asked her straight out, "Lillian, what happened that night? I need the truth. No more half stories." She didn't answer. She just sat down, put her hands over her face, and whispered, "Clyde, I don't know how to tell you this." My heart stopped. That was all she said, nothing else. And that silence, it's worse than any answer I could have gotten, because it means there's something she's terrified to say, something that could rip apart the life we built. I spent the next day like a ghost in my own house. I couldn't focus on anything. Every sound, every glance from her felt like it carried a hidden meaning I couldn't decode. Lillian moved around the house like nothing happened, humming to herself, cooking breakfast, scrolling through her phone. I hated how normal she looked, how easily she could pretend everything was fine, while I felt like my chest was caving in. I wanted to ask her again, to push harder for answers, but I couldn't. I was scared of what I might hear if she actually told me the truth. Later that evening, while she was in the shower, I made a choice I never thought I would. I picked up her phone. My hands were shaking so bad, I almost dropped it. I wasn't proud of myself. I felt like some desperate, paranoid loser. But I needed to know. I started scrolling through her gallery, looking for anything out of place, but most of the photos were harmless. Us on vacation, her dog, random screenshots. Then I saw it. A photo taken at 3:12 a.m., the kind of photo that doesn't belong in a married woman's phone. It wasn't explicit, but it was enough to twist my stomach into knots. Her green dress from that night, crumpled on what looked like a couch I didn't recognize. A glass of wine in the corner, and just barely visible, Trent's watch sitting on the table next to her purse. I froze, staring at that image like it might vanish if I blinked. I didn't even realize she'd come out of the shower until she saw me holding her phone. Her face went pale instantly. She didn't even try to grab it back. She just whispered, "Clyde, please don't." And that was it. No explanation, no apology, just those 3 words that made my blood boil. I demanded answers, my voice breaking, and she just started crying, loud, uncontrollable sobs. I couldn't take it. I left the house, slamming the door behind me, not knowing where to go. I ended up parked outside a gas station at midnight, sitting in my car with my head against the steering wheel, wondering how the hell my life had turned into this mess. I felt pathetic, a grown man crying alone in a car, gripping a phone like it was some kind of bomb about to go off. When I came back home, she was sitting at the kitchen table, eyes swollen, her hands shaking as she clutched a cup of tea like it could hold her together. She looked up at me and said, "Clyde, I swear I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But she didn't finish her sentence. She just stopped talking, like even she didn't believe her own words. And I just stood there, feeling like the ground beneath me was cracking open. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling while Lillian slept beside me, her breathing uneven and restless. I kept thinking about that photo, about Trent's watch on the table, about the message from that unknown number. Every detail dug into me like glass shards. I wanted to wake her up and force the truth out of her, but something inside me held back. Maybe I was afraid of what I would hear. Maybe I wasn't ready for my entire life to fall apart in a single conversation. By morning, I was exhausted but wired, like my mind had been running a marathon all night. I made coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and just waited for her to come downstairs. When she finally did, she wouldn't look at me. She poured herself a cup of coffee without saying a word, and the silence was unbearable. I couldn't take it anymore. "Lillian," I said, my voice breaking, "I need you to tell me everything. No lies, no excuses. I can't keep living like this." She froze, her hand shaking as she set the cup down. For a moment, I saw something in her eyes, a flash of guilt, fear, maybe both. Then she said quietly, "You don't want to know, Clyde." My heart sank because I realized she was right. I didn't want to know, but I had to. I needed to hear it, even if it destroyed me. She started talking, her voice trembling like she was confessing to a crime. "That night, I drank too much. We all did. It wasn't supposed to happen, but I crossed a line with Trent. I don't even remember all of it. I woke up on his couch and I knew I'd ruined everything." She covered her face with her hands, and I just sat there, numb, like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. I thought I'd scream, throw something, maybe even walk out, but I couldn't move. I just stared at her, my chest tight, every word cutting deeper. Then she said something that broke me completely. "I didn't come home because I didn't know how to face you." That was it. All those hours I spent waiting, worrying, calling her over and over. She just didn't want to face me. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so bad, I had to grip the table to steady myself. I wanted to ask a million questions. Why him? Why that night? Why wasn't I enough? But none of the words came out. The rest of the day was a blur. I went for a drive, no destination in mind, just trying to outrun the chaos in my head. I ended up parked outside the diner, where we had our first date, staring through the window like I was watching someone else's life play out. I kept thinking about how we used to laugh, how we used to talk about the future, how she used to look at me like I was the only person in the world, and now, I don't even know who she is anymore. When I got home, she was sitting in the same spot at the kitchen table, her eyes red, her face pale. "Clyde, I'm sorry," she whispered, but it didn't sound like enough. How do you fix something once it's broken like this? How do you look at the person you love and not see the betrayal etched into every line of their face? I still don't know the answer to that. All I know is that something inside me snapped that day. I can't go back to the way things were, not after hearing those words. The next few days were a haze of silence, unanswered questions, and a strange tension that clung to the house like damp air. I couldn't look at Lillian without feeling 100 emotions at once: anger, sadness, disbelief, and this crushing sense of loss. Every time I tried to talk to her, she'd shut down, staring at the floor or fiddling with her sleeves like a guilty kid. It wasn't just about what happened that night anymore. It was about everything it represented. How long had she been drifting away from me? How long had I been blind to it? Then, something happened that pushed me over the edge. On Wednesday evening, while Lillian was taking a shower, I got another message from that same unknown number. This time, it wasn't words. It was a picture. My blood went cold. It was Trent's living room, the same couch I saw in the photo on her phone, only this time, there were 2 wine glasses on the table, and a blurry shot of what looked like Lillian sitting there, leaning close to him. My hands shook as I stared at it. Someone had taken that photo, someone who wanted me to see it. But who and why? I felt my heart thundering as I marched upstairs, burst into the bathroom, and shoved my phone in her face. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice breaking in a way that made me sound more pathetic than angry. Her face went pale, and for a split second, I saw panic flash in her eyes. She grabbed the towel tighter around her and said, "Clyde, please, I can explain." "Explain?" I snapped, because so far, all I've heard is silence and half-truths. "Who's sending me this? Why are they sending me this?" She crumpled, sinking to the floor, and muttered, "I don't know who's sending you those. But Trent, he's not who you think he is." I tried to stop it, Clyde. I swear I didn't want it to happen. Her voice was shaking, and part of me wanted to believe her, but another part of me was screaming that she was just protecting him. I left the house again, unable to breathe in the same space as her. I ended up driving past Trent's building, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, imagining walking up there and demanding answers. I almost did. I parked outside and sat there for nearly an hour, watching his lights flicker on and off, wondering if she'd been there, laughing with him, drinking with him, lying to me the entire time. Then something unexpected happened. A man I didn't recognize came out of the building, spotted me sitting there, and walked straight over to my car. He leaned down, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "You don't know half of what's going on, man. You should stay away from Trent." Then he just walked off like he hadn't dropped a bomb in my lap. I sat there in stunned silence. Who was that guy? How did he know me? And what the hell did he mean by that? By the time I got home, my mind was on fire with questions. I couldn't keep living in this fog of uncertainty. I needed to know everything, no matter how ugly it was. And I had a feeling that the real story was even worse than what Lillian had confessed. I couldn't shake the stranger's words. "You don't know half of what's going on. Stay away from Trent." They replayed in my head like a broken record, louder with every passing hour. I barely spoke to Lillian the next day. I could see she was terrified of me asking questions, but I was past the point of quiet suffering. I needed answers, and I wasn't about to get them from her vague apologies and trembling whispers. If she couldn't tell me the truth, I'd dig it out myself. I started with the simplest thing I could think of: Trent's social media. At first glance, his life looked annoyingly perfect. Carefully curated pictures, gym selfies, expensive watches, parties with the kind of people who all look like they're auditioning for reality TV. But then I noticed something odd. His account had been tagged in a few photos I couldn't see, unless I clicked on profiles I didn't recognize. A couple of them were private accounts, but one belonged to a guy named Mason, who seemed to post everything. I scrolled through Mason's feed, and my heart almost stopped when I saw it. A photo from the night of the party, posted around 3 a.m. There was Lillian, standing next to Trent, smiling, but it wasn't her usual smile. It looked forced, tight, like she was trying to hide how uncomfortable she was. His hand was on her waist, too low, too possessive, and the comments underneath made my blood boil. "Trent wins again," one of them read, followed by a string of laughing emojis. I didn't even realize my hands were shaking until I dropped my phone. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just about Lillian making a mistake. This was about Trent, this smug, arrogant bastard who seemed to treat women like trophies. The more I looked into his world, the worse it got. There were whispers in the comments, mentions of things like Trent's little games and another one bites the dust. It wasn't just me picking up on something dark. Other people clearly knew about his behavior, and they weren't surprised. Fueled by anger and desperation, I decided to do something reckless. I drove to his office building during lunch hours. I waited in my car until I saw him come out. He was exactly the kind of guy I hated. Perfect hair, smug grin, designer clothes that looked like they cost more than my car payment. I walked straight up to him before I even realized what I was doing. "We need to talk," I said, my voice tight. My hands clenched so hard I could feel my nails digging into my palms. He looked me up and down like I was some inconvenience blocking his path. About what? He smirked. Lillian? The way he said her name, casual, mocking, made me see red. Stay away from my wife, I snapped. He chuckled, like I was some pathetic joke, and said, maybe you should ask her who was really looking for attention that night. My blood boiled so hard I thought I'd lose it right there in the parking lot. But something in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a challenge, like he wanted me to do something stupid. I walked away before I did something I'd regret, but the sound of his laughter followed me all the way back to my car. When I got home, I couldn't stop pacing. I told Lillian what happened, and instead of being angry at me for confronting him, she burst into tears. Clyde, you don't understand, she said, shaking. He's not just some guy at work. He knows things about people. He uses them. He plays these disgusting games. I thought I could handle it, but that night, she stopped, her voice breaking, and I felt this mix of anger and dread crawl up my spine. I realized then that Trent wasn't just a threat to my marriage. He was something worse, something dangerous. That night, I barely slept. I started thinking that maybe this wasn't just about betrayal. Maybe this was about control, manipulation, and something much darker that Lillian got caught up in without realizing how deep it went. And I knew one thing for sure. If I wanted to protect what little was left of my marriage, I'd have to go deeper into Trent's world, no matter how much it disgusted me. I don't even remember how many hours I spent that night digging through every corner of the internet, searching for anything about Trent. My laptop screen burned my eyes, and my hands ached from typing, but I couldn't stop. Something about that man's grin, that casual arrogance when he said Lillian's name, was like gasoline poured over every ounce of anger I'd been holding inside me. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was the terrifying feeling that this man had his hooks in my life, and I didn't even know how deep they went. I started by checking old company forums, LinkedIn connections, anything I could find. At first, everything looked clean, too clean. But then I stumbled on a name, Samantha R., a former coworker of Trent's who left the company 2 years ago. She'd posted something cryptic on a long-forgotten thread about toxic work cultures, where she mentioned a man who thrives on breaking people apart for sport. The way she described him, the charm, the manipulation, the way he'd pit people against each other sounded exactly like Trent. My stomach tightened. I had to know more, so I messaged her, expecting no reply. But an hour later, my phone buzzed. Her first message sent a chill down my spine. Is he still ruining lives? Be careful. People who cross him usually regret it. I called her immediately, my hands trembling. She answered, and her voice was calm but heavy, like she'd been carrying something for years. She told me how Trent had a habit of pulling people into his little circle, then using secrets and lies to manipulate them. He'd flirt, he'd provoke, and when things blew up, he'd stand back like it was all some kind of game. If your wife was at one of his private parties, she said, he wanted something from her. He always does. By the time I hung up, I felt sick. I couldn't tell if Lillian was just a victim of his twisted games or if she'd willingly gone along with it. But either way, I needed the truth. That night, when I confronted her with what I'd learned, she broke down in a way I hadn't seen before. Not just tears. She was shaking, her hands covering her face as she whispered, "You don't know what he's capable of, Clyde." I tried to leave the party, but She stopped, her voice collapsing into silence. I wanted to scream, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed her to keep talking. She finally told me the rest of the story. After midnight, when most people had left, Trent cornered her. He kept pouring drinks, kept saying things that made her uncomfortable, things that made her feel trapped. She tried to call me, but her phone was dead. That's when she said she panicked and stayed on the couch until morning, because she didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to come home like that, she said. I didn't want you to see me like that. I believed her, or at least I wanted to, but there was still something gnawing at me. The photos, the texts, the stranger warning me to stay away from Trent. This wasn't over. In fact, it felt like I was just getting to the edge of something much darker. I couldn't shake the feeling that Trent was watching us, like he was waiting for me to make the wrong move so he could twist the knife even deeper. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit around and let this man control the narrative anymore. If Trent wanted to play games, I was going to drag every one of his secrets into the light. I didn't care if it got messy. I wanted him exposed, ruined, and far away from my wife. The problem was, I didn't yet realize how dangerous it would be to dig into a man like Trent. I spent the next few days preparing myself for war. I was ready to expose Trent for who he really was. But the truth is, I wasn't just angry at him anymore. I was angry at everything. At myself for trusting too much. At Lillian for letting it get this far. And at this gnawing emptiness inside me that wouldn't stop screaming that my marriage was over. But just when I thought there was no turning back, something unexpected happened that shifted everything. Lillian came to me one night, eyes swollen but steady, and placed her phone on the table. "Read everything," she said. "No more secrets." There were no flirty texts, no hidden conversations, just a string of messages where she'd begged him to stop contacting her after that night. I read every word, my chest tightening, realizing she'd been as scared of him as I was angry. For the first time in days, I believed her. She wasn't perfect, and yes, she'd put herself in a bad situation. But the truth was, she wasn't the enemy. We both had been caught in Trent's toxic game. With her permission, I contacted Samantha again, and together we gathered proof of Trent's behavior, screenshots, testimonies from people who had seen what he'd done over the years. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't clean, but we got enough evidence to force him out of the company. When I saw the email confirming his departure, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion, like I'd been carrying a mountain on my shoulders and it finally slid off. Lillian and I decided to start fresh. We began therapy, not just to fix what had been broken, but to understand how we'd gotten here in the first place. And slowly, things started to heal. We talked more, laughed more, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were truly on the same side. It's not perfect, not yet, but for the first time since that horrible night, I can see a future again, a real one. So that's my confession. I went from being a man on the brink of losing everything to finding a way to rebuild, one piece at a time. And now, I want to ask you, what would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever been caught in a situation where you didn't know if you could trust the person you love? Share your thoughts in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious to hear your take. Thank you for listening to my story here on Forsaken Joe. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment about the most shocking moment you think would have broken you, or maybe made you fight to fix things.